Hello, my name is Julie Fry and I'm the curator at Stan Hywet Hall and Gardens. 2023 marks the 125th anniversary of the Goodyear Tire Rubber Company. In recognition of this tremendous achievement, we are issuing a 10-part video series, one each month beginning in March and running through the rest of the year. The Goodyear Tire Rubber Company was founded by F.A. and his brother C.W. Seiberling. F.A. and his wife Gertrude Seiberling are also responsible for the conception and creation of Stan Hywet Hall and Gardens, their family home for 40 years. This month we're going to talk about the 4 leaders of the Goodyear Tire Rubber Company. Well, of course, F.A. is often considered the president or the executive director of Goodyear. There were really 4 men that as a team worked together and pushed Goodyear to be the success that it eventually became. So the 2 that we at Stan Hywet Hall and Gardens are of course most familiar with are F.A. and C.W. Seiberling. The 2 brothers co-founded Goodyear Tire Rubber Company in 1898 and really had pivotal roles in the creation and evolution of the company from that point moving forward. So I have a quote for each of them. Both are written by a man named W.D. Schultz. He worked at Goodyear basically almost from the time the company was created in 1898 through the 1940s. What he writes about F.A. is, so by 1898, F.A. had accumulated managerial experience in a variety of businesses: straw boards, cereals, street railways, mining, banking, printing, fire insurance, even in the entertainment field, as his father for years owned the old Academy of Music. He had practical business experience in all its phases: manufacturing, selling, finance, and management. He had a brilliant, inventive intellect, a magnetic personality, a capacity for forming lasting friendships, boundless energy, and above all, supreme confidence in his own ability. 2 of his recorded sayings typify the man. He once told a group discussing the need for good highways, "I'm the head of the Department of Visions in my concern." And as he told a Goodyear sales group, "Get there just a little bit ahead of the other fellow." So F.A. always headed the management team. He had boundless energy, as Schultz said. He was very creative, he was inventive, and he really never saw anything as an obstacle. There was nothing that he could not overcome. There was nothing that his team could not succeed in overcoming. And I think he always believed that in his core, which is what got him out of so many near fatal moments at Goodyear. Moments where you think, oh, the company is not going to make it, or they've just gone too far. F.A. was always able to pull it together, and it was, we want to make sure that while he gets tremendous credit, it was also due to this team that was behind him the entire time. So his brother Charlie, or C.W. Seiberling, was described this way: C.W. Seiberling's imprint may not be as clearly found anywhere in sales or production or administration, but it was everywhere, pervasive, knitting the organization together, keeping it a unified cooperative group which worked and played together. For Charlie, Seiberling knew every man in the organization by his first name, could manage to find time always to visit the sick and the injured, was a moving spirit in every employee picnic or baseball game, danced alike with 16-year-olds and grandmothers, was never too busy to listen to anybody's troubles or congratulate him on a new baby. And the family spirit that came quickly to characterize the organization was largely the reflection of the contagious humanity of C.W. Seiberling. And it's often described throughout history that while F.A. was the head or the brains of Goodyear, Charlie was the heart. So that's how those 2 brothers really complemented each other. The 2 other men that were part of this core team were Paul Litchfield and George Stadelman. Now, Paul Litchfield, many people are familiar with because he eventually in 1926 became the president and executive director of Goodyear himself and held that position for many decades and really took the company to being the largest rubber company in the world. But he started out just as a factory manager. F.A. hired him in 1900. He recruited him actually from a Massachusetts company and went to MIT. And F.A. said, let me give you a 2-year contract, come out to Akron, see what you think of the Goodyear Tire Rubber Company, see if you want to stick around and help us make some tires. So Lichfield moved to Akron to kind of see what this Goodyear company was all about, this very fledgling rubber company at the time, and became so ensconced in it and so passionate about staying at Goodyear and helping to make Goodyear successful. That seemed to be a very infectious quality of coming to Goodyear, is that they had people that became lifelong employees and that were so dedicated to the company. So Lichfield is described this way: Paul Litchfield, as manager of production, brought to Goodyear the trained scientist's conception of how best to serve human needs with the output of his factory. And he had superb executive ability, which many scientists lacked. He could and did build an organization capable of putting his advanced ideas into effect. In his years as factory manager, he thoroughly demonstrated his production genius. So he had this great balance of this scientific, inventive mind, but he also always kept the factory worker in mind as well. And while as factory manager, while the Seiberlings were still running Goodyear, he initiated what was known as the Factory Council, where different departments came together, had a representative that came together to discuss issues, discuss problems, help to problem solve again so they could avoid that 1913 strike situation. He also created what was called the Flying Squadron in 1913, which is a group of core men that learned every facet of the factory process. So again, if there was ever a strike or something like that, these men could come in and operate any of the machinery throughout the production process. So they didn't have this kind of segregation of men only knowing one or two facets. The Flying Squadron could basically take a tire from raw rubber to completion. The final man, George Stadelman, worked in the marketing department and was the head of that division eventually. He started out as a salesman. He was hired in 1902. He had worked at a carriage tire sales company and came to Goodyear to be a carriage tire salesman there and worked his way up. He was eventually made general sales manager in 1905 and then VP in charge of sales by 1915. He didn't have a lot of executive experience, but it was something that he acquired over time. And this is a quote by Hugh Allen, who wrote the book, The House of Goodyear. Stadelman was to be rated as one of its great sales managers, though Stadelman would be almost the last man one would pick out then as a salesman. He was an intellect, kindly, understanding, shy, almost gentle. In his 20 years in charge of Goodyear sales, he never made a speech. He avoided crowds. He had, however, foresight, the gift of analysis, integrity, and a high sense of honor, and personal qualities which won him the love and support of his men and the confidence of the industry. And F.A. wrote this in the Akron Beacon Journal in 1926 after George Stadelman had passed away quite unexpectedly at the age of 53. To the masses, he seemed a man of austerity, a personality apart. To those who knew him well, he was modest, unobstructive in demeanor, of a retiring disposition, never taking part in acrimonious discussion. His austerity was but the mask of gentleness. No worthy cause in our community failed to receive his active moral and financial support. His benefactions were many, but conducted quietly, so that the world little knew the broad outpouring of his heart. Pure in thought, kind and courteous always, generous, capable, loyal, a noble spirit has passed into immortality. So those four men really made the core team that helped make Goodyear successful, that took it from a startup company in 1898, or basically by 1900, and then transformed it into being the largest tire manufacturer by 1916. And Stadelman and Litchfield continued on after FA and CW stepped down in 1921 and continued to be successful. And interesting to note, FA, George Stadelman, and Paul Litchfield were all executive director of Goodyear at one time. So of the core kind of founding team of Goodyear, 3 of those men got to be executive director of it at some point. So thank you once again for joining me to learn more about Goodyear history. I look forward to sharing more again with you next month.